what are the worst injuries you've sustained during the simplest, most mundane tasks that should not have caused any injuries? When I was a little kid, I fell over and broke my collarbone while sitting and eating waffles. I wish this was fake. Edit. About a year before this incident, I broke the same bone playing on my mother's bed. I believed I was a Power Ranger and rolled off the bed, onto the hardwood floor. Story 2. I built a nice counter for our laundry room, installed the new washing machine, installed the wall-mounted dryer, made shelves with the leftover wood, and even found time to plant an apple tree my mom had bought, all in the same day. Then slipped a disc when I was washing my hands. Story 3. So the reason I asked the question was because two things have happened today that made me wonder if I'm the only one this crap happens to. First one, I burned my eyelids after the egg I was flying flew out of the pan and smacked me in the face. Second one, my son fractured his wrist by banging into a pole while he was walking down the street. Story 4. Little me, around 8 years old, spent a few hours gazing through his telescope into the moon, the stars and the sky. It was awesome. When I was done, I hugged my telescope, optical tube down, and eyepiece up. I was very short. Very, very short. Almost telescope size back then. So, of course, I tripped. By reflex, I looked down, while at the same time, the big end of the telescope hit the ground, and my mouth caught the eyepiece. Almost. Right between the upper lip and the nose, went almost all the way in, and turns out my face is a gusher. In two spots, it went all the way through my face meat and hit my front teeth. Lucky me, it didn't crack a tooth. Thanks for the ER trip, Mr. Telescope. Who knew stargazing was such a dangerous activity? Holy crap, dude. I can't fully wrap my head around this description, but it sounds like the eyepiece of the telescope went through his lip and into his teeth. How do you not have a massive hole in your mouth after that? Besides, your mouth. Anyway, that sounds terrible. Moving on. Story 5. I used to skateboard about 25 to 30 kilometers a day when I lived in Amsterdam for at least 3 years straight. Never had any injuries or accidents. It's as easy and automatic as riding a bike as a Dutch person. When I went out to skate for 2 minutes in the UK, I fell and broke my collarbone right away. I blame having to ride on the other side of the road and bad luck. Story 6. I bowled in college. One day, I ended up showing up to practice late because I slept through my alarm when I took a nap. So I'm rushing to get to practice I effed up. At this point, I'm 30 to 45 minutes late and finally get to the bowling alley, and in my infinite wisdom, I decide I'm just going to start throwing shots without easing into it because I've already missed enough practice. It wasn't a day full of good decisions, as you can tell. 2 shots in, I proceed to throw out my hip and was limping around for over a week. I not only threw out a hip at 19, I did it bowling. So this is for anyone that engages in any kind of physical activity, whether that's sports or singing, playing musical instruments, whatever. You must warm up beforehand, and it's only going to become more and more essential as you get older. If this guy's throwing his hip out at 19, imagine when he's 30, 40 years old trying to do things without warming up or stretching. So keep that in mind. Story 7. I was 7 years old playing tag at a local children's park with a few friends. It was about 6 to 7 p.m. in the fall, getting darker by the second. I was running from the kid who was it, and because of how short I am, I ran into the plastic outside the bottom of a walkway, making a very deep and wide gash right above my right elbow. I blacked out for about a minute or so. I came to without feeling any pain, and it didn't help that I have a very high pain tolerance. I felt something wet on my head and put my hand up to it. Because it was dark out, young me saw the darker tinted substance in my hand. Thinking it was ketchup, I licked it. After about 10 seconds of processing the taste, I realized, oh crap, this is blood. I ran over to my dad, and he, laughing his ass off, decides to take me back to our neighborhood to consult with our neighbor and good friend, who was a nurse. She tells my dad to take me to the emergency room. At this point, he's laughing even harder. We went in, I got some stitches, I don't remember how many, and I also got to be made fun of by my father. Edit. Turns out, running into things as a little kid while playing tag is a very common issue. Story 8. 2 years ago, I tore my meniscus and blew out my knee playing ping pong at our office Christmas party. Stepped to the left and went down hard. Worst part was 2 days later when I finally stubbornly went to emerge that the nurses keep me a pro athlete, and the dude ahead of me had the exact same injury from a vicious hockey hit. Story 9. I dislocated my knee, putting socks on. I was standing near the foot of my bed and was doing a balancing act, putting socks on. When I went to put my right leg back down, my pant leg somehow got stuck on the footboard of my bed. My jeans somehow then decided to rip, and my knee moved in a way it was never intended to. I'm definitely a klutz and tend to find myself in weird situations like this far too often. Story 10. I was cutting potatoes. Couldn't figure out why I couldn't cut completely through the specific potato. Turns out my finger was in the way. It wasn't a bad injury, didn't hurt at all, didn't need stitches, and was actually pretty funny. But there was a ton of blood, and all the other students and the teacher were all freaking out. Bleeding is fun. Story 11. I'm late to the party, but here goes. I slipped on my neck wrong and tore an artery. That created a blood clot, which then lodged in my brainstem, causing a massive stroke. I spent a month in the hospital and had to relearn to swallow, speak, focus my eyes, stand, walk, and a dozen other little things. Don't fall asleep watching YouTube videos, I guess. That had to have been a pretty uncomfortable position to fall asleep in. Like, OP must have been really tired to fall asleep in a position that would cause an artery to rupture or tear. That is nuts, man. Story 12. While penning lines and verses, while writing rhymes at night, I had to see the nurses 'cause something wasn't right. They said my nouns were swollen, my metaphors had dropped. I'd pierced my semicolon, my heart had just full stopped. My verbs demanded actions, I'd lost apostrophe. I suffered from contractions, I punctuated me. My words had all been spoken, my fables lost to fate. My rhyming meter broken, my period was late. And then they called my mama, he isn't making sense. He slipped into a coma, the situation's tense. Story 13. Not me, but my husband. He brushes his teeth very hard and fast. One day, he somehow hit his teeth and broke the toothbrush in half, then stabbed himself in the cheek. After 2 hours of trying to get the bleeding to stop, I bought some butterfly sutures to close the wound. Unfortunately, he did the same thing again a week later. He blames me for, quote, buying cheap toothbrushes. Story 14. I broke my ankle while walking down a street in a foreign country, slipped on a wet drain cover in a sidewalk. Surgery that night, 2-week hospital stay, then managing the rest of the study abroad on crutches. Years later, I now have major arthritis in the broken joint, which is more and more significantly limiting my mobility. Bonus, managed to break my toe by stubbing it while walking across my bedroom the day after I got back from a trip to a different foreign country. All my friends assumed I'd injured myself abroad again. Story 15. My wife worked out during the first 8 months of her first pregnancy. Modified as necessary as our son was growing. She set a personal record of 200-pound deadlift at the 8-month mark. She was scolded as that was not the time for PRs, but impressive nonetheless. And she threw out her back, bending over to pick up laundry on the floor. Story 16. I got hurt by a screen door. Was taking my dog outside to use the bathroom early one morning, and Snoopy decided he had to go really bad and started flying down the stairs of the back porch. He was on a leash and I didn't want to hurt him and make him fall down the stairs, so I rushed out behind him. I was wearing a pair of wool socks and slippers, and as I awkwardly started following him, the bottom corner of the screen door clipped me on the heel. It hurt a bit, and I just limped around as he did his business. When I got back inside, I decided to take my sock off because it was uncomfortably hurting, and I see that there's a good amount of blood that has seeped through the sock. I pull it off and see that I actually have a pretty big gash across the back of my ankle. A effing screen door did that to me, all because of crappy timing. Story 17. I broke my 2 smallest toes and the growth plate in my foot. Ever seen those giant plastic bins for wrapping paper? It was Christmas, and I had the lid to one of those. I had my small dog in the lid, and was pushing her up and down the hallway carpet on my hands and knees. Well, we had those old metal spring door stoppers, and one of them no longer had the cap on it. I stubbed my toe on it, and the spring/hooked end went into my foot, wrapped around the bone, and twisted my 2 toes upside down. Imagine my surprise when I looked down after thinking I had simply stubbed my toe. Story 18. My mom broke her foot stepping out of the front door. The step is about 4 inches. She was in her 30s. She had lived in the house for years and used the step every day without incident. She doesn't have osteoporosis or any other bone problem. She didn't fall. She just put her foot down slightly off center, and it snapped one of her metatarsals. Story 19. I was laying in bed and threw my back out. Damn, I couldn't breathe straight for over an hour before I managed to roll over to another position that I hoped was more comfortable. It was not. Big mistake. I also managed to get a concussion in my sleep when a lamp fell on my head. If you don't count those as an activity, how about walking? I took some weird step and broke my little toe. You cannot really go more mundane than walking. Story 20. I broke my foot stepping off a curb. There is a minor pothole, and I mean very small dip, that I didn't notice when stepping, and my foot rolled sideways as I put all my weight on it. Heard the pop. Didn't hurt too bad at first, so I went about my day. When I got home, I couldn't get my shoe off without unlacing it fully due to swelling. Went in the next day and yep, broke my foot by stepping off a curb. Story 21. My dad stabbed through his palm so hard with a knife while getting avocado pits out of avocados that he had a bruise on the back of his hand from where the tip almost went all the way through. He yelled out, "F a duck," when it happened, pulled the knife out and instinctively jerked his hand to numb the pain kind of, and created a Jackson Pollock painting of his blood all over the kitchen ceiling. Story 22. Snowboarding. I spent the whole day at the terrain park. Got a 360 down pretty well and was working my way up to hopping onto rails, building a lot of confidence before it was time to go. I only go snowboarding about 3 times a year max, so it was a big step for me, and I was feeling really good about my day there. Then my little sister asked me to go down the bunny hill, which is where the beginners / people who have never skied before go to learn. It's a gentle hill that hardly ever gets fast. I rode down it with my sister skiing beside me. Upon trying to stop at the bottom, at a very low speed, I caught my edge and flipped, scorpioned myself so badly that my board blade actually sliced the back of my head / neck connection, and I bled a lot. A scorpion is when you fall onto your stomach and your heels still carry over, making a scorpion shape. In this case, my heels and snowboard were like a scorpion's stinger, and I was flat on my face in the snow, like the scorpion's belly. My scorpion stinger of a snowboard carried far enough to slice the back of my neck. I still used my blood-stained ski coat. I felt defeated, despite the skills I'd built up that day. Yeah, that's tough, but I think what hurt this poster the most clearly is their pride, because it happened on the freaking bunny hill. Not the black, not one of those intimidating slopes. Yeah, you scorpioned and sliced your neck up on the bunny hill, so yeah, I feel for you. That's tough. Story 23. I jumped through a set of aluminum double doors in the back of a grocery store to flirt with the cashier I crushed on as a bag boy. I had grown a lot recently. The top of my head hit the cement top of the door frame. It scalped me a bit, and I flipped and landed on my head on the hard, cold tile floor. The pool of blood surrounded me rapidly. I had to be taken to the hospital to get 22 stitches to reattach my scalp. I got the afternoon off work, and 2 weeks later, I lost my virginity to that cashier. Worth it. Story 24. I've got a couple. 1. My lung collapsed from just being alive and being tall. This crap happens. It's called a spontaneous pneumothorax. Happens to tall, thin people. I was in line on Black Friday getting bubble tea. Thought it was heartburn, slept it off, got worse, went to the ER next day. 3 weeks in the hospital. 2. Broke my humerus at a soccer tournament. No idea how I broke it. I just woke up one day and my shoulder hurt, so I thought it was a cramp or a tight muscle. I proceeded to finish out the tournament, stretch, pull, and spin my shoulder around trying to get it to feel better. Yeah, all the stretching and moving made it worse. But hey, we won the tournament. Story 25. Breaking a stick for firewood. It was about the thickness of a nickel. I was breaking it how I always break sticks that size. Thumbs out and push through the middle. Super simple and effective. Well, apparently my thumb had popped out when I started this process and I hadn't noticed. I continued through the stick breaking process until I felt my thumb go the wrong way. Dropped the stick and realized what just happened. This was at summer camp, so I had a brace that kept my thumb in the thumbs up position all summer. Did that all the time and in all photos. So much that it became natural for me to pose thumbs up in photos. Story 26. I have 2. 1. I leaned in to get a final clinging sock out of the drying machine and threw my back out for 2 weeks. The fact that my body weight caused it is what led to the next injury. 2. Through diet, 1,000 varied calories a day, and exercise, at least 6 nights a week jogging for as much as 8 miles on a treadmill, I managed to lose 65 pounds in 5 months. This murder-faced my gallbladder with gallstones and required surgery. I remember laying in the emergency room in a different state when the surgeon explained that my rapid weight loss caused my gallbladder to get backed up with stones. processing all that fat through. I exclaimed, "But I did exactly what you guys, the doctors, told me to do." Story 27. Broke my ankle when I rolled it while wearing high platforms. I'd managed to scale a fence and climb over a shed in them, but apparently just walking around was a bridge too far. It was pretty embarrassing having to explain what happened at the hospital. I was sitting in between two dudes who had broken bones from coming off their motorbikes. Just lie about what happened. You don't have to share the whole horny details of the story, or just tell the truth and omit that very specific part. You don't have to put yourself through that. Come on. Story 28. Not me, but a coworker. Worked in a normal office environment, medium-sized company, 100 plus employees. She got a paper cut one day. Extremely small, no big deal. She never bandaged the cut. Ended up getting MRSA through the cut. Hospitalized for more than a month. Fluid buildup so bad in her arm that they put tubes all throughout her arm to drain fluid. Her arm was so inflated that it looked like she was one of those my 600-pound life patients. She was barely 140 pounds. Pics looked like some robot that was liquid cooled. The tubes going in and out of her arm. She ended up losing her entire arm from a small paper cut. Now, anytime I get a small cut, I put Neosporin and bandage until completely healed. Apparently, this isn't that uncommon of a scenario. Story 29. Praying at church. They had pads for us to kneel down on in the pews for prayer. I missed the pad and fell forward, smashed my face into the pew in front of me. Bloody nose instantly started gushing. It wasn't broken, but I got up to run to the bathroom, and my foot snagged the pad at the end, and I fell over, put my hands down to catch my fall, and sprained my wrist in the aisle. Nose still popping blood all over the floor. I'm an atheist now. Story 30. Sophomore year of high school, I was in a lifetime fitness class where we played various sports for a few weeks at a time. We were playing badminton one week, and the courts were all next to each other. As I was picking up the birdie from the ground in my game, I bent back up and saw a birdie that a guy was inadvertently serving from the court next to mine come flying at me. Next thing I knew, I woke up with everyone around me and my eyes swollen shut with blood coming down my face. The birdie and its hard rubber ball hit me square in my right eye, and I was diagnosed with a microhyphema, bleeding in the eye. I had to sit upright in bed and take about 20 eye drops a day for a week straight, as well as get tested for glaucoma for 3 years afterwards. Great luck. Story 31. I sprained my knee while selling pastries in middle school. I bent down and twisted around to grab a crate. Did it too fast, apparently. I also managed to get a large gash in my knee by falling in the school's toilets when I was 8 to 9 years old. I didn't fall in the toilet bowl or anything, just slipped when running in there. Slid across the muddy room and crashed in a wall's corner. It dug right in my knee and sliced it open. Story 32. Tried to start a lawnmower with a bent drive shaft or some crap. I don't even know how it happened, but the edge of the handle, upon release, would whip in a very unpredictable way. It smacked into the first joint on the back of my thumb and cut the effing crap out of it. It was a mangle injury and it's been 2 years and I still have a pretty big scar. I also used to work landscaping, so it's not even like I can't start a lawnmower. This one was just cursed. Story 33. I was changing a curtain rod. It was very high, so I stood on my mostly broken, rolling reclining computer chair, while my husband yelled at me from the other room to wait, or I was gonna bust my ass. I arrogantly replied, "I got this. I don't need no help from no man. I'm a strong, independent woman." I said this jokingly, but irony doesn't care. I got it set up, jumped from the computer chair, and executed a bow, totally unscathed, and yelled out, "Ha! Never do this. It just makes the irony worse." I then proceeded to trip over nothing, got my foot stuck under the wheels of my computer chair, smacked my face into my desk, and crushed my ribs into the control knob on my computer. My injuries were as follows: 3 broken toes, swollen tongue, chipped tooth, rug burns everywhere, bruised face, bruised ribs, and very bruised pride. Story 34. I dislocated my shoulder while playing with the cat. He's rather aggressive and quick to attack. He was outside and didn't like the way I looked at him. He jolted towards the window and punched it. As a reflex, I jolted backwards. In doing so, I dislocated my right shoulder somehow. This was March 2017, and I've dislocated my right shoulder 4 additional times since then. Turns out my right is easy to dislocate. Story 35. I tripped over paper towels once. I just bought a pack and was bringing in all the groceries. I set the pack on the counter briefly to make room elsewhere to put the paper towels away. Unknown to me, one of the rolls fell out and landed on the floor. White paper towels on a white floor. You'd never see that. I came back to retrieve them and, not seeing the stray roll that fell out, tripped and flew across the kitchen. I wasn't too badly injured, but at least I can now tell everyone I tripped over paper towels. Story 36. I once opened a door into my toe, causing bruising and bleeding, enough to go to a doctor. Parents overreacted a tiny bit, meaning 2 appointments with the doctor, a comeback when it's cleaner so we can see any damage, it being bandaged for days, and going to some specialist as the nail bed may be damaged. Specialist literally walked in the room, looked at the toe, and said the nail will drop, but it'll probably grow back. 21st had half a nail and after a month or so had a full nail again, and you can't tell. Sadly, I have no proof this happened, but it hurt like a female dog. Also, I've managed to cut my arm while closing a blind a month ago and stabbed myself with a Stanley knife while doing homework. I was 8 and have a scar for that one. Friend's roommate once cut her hand open while trying to add another hole to her belt. So I'm not the stupidest or clumsiest person I know. Story 37. When I was 6, I was brushing my teeth, leaning onto the sink when I heard my dog scratching under the door. I turned around to let him in, but I instead started to slip around the wet floor thanks to me playing in the tub, getting water everywhere a while earlier. I then proceed to try grabbing onto the sink to keep myself from falling, but it failed under my weight. I was quite fat for my age then, and the sink was ancient, and fall down onto the floor, breaking up into many sharp pieces. Now, since I was holding onto the sink to keep my balance, and with it falling down, I fell down as well, onto the many sharp pieces. It happened so quick that I practically felt nothing. I quickly stood back up, raised my left leg up to survey the damage, and I could see my left elbow had multiple 2-centimeter smallish holes. My left leg had also been cut open at the calf, forming a V-shaped 15-centimeter hole. I can see each layer of my leg, starting from the skin to the fat and the muscles like a fish fillet. It then started dripping blood. Before I could scream, my dad, with all of his dad's reflexes, knew something was wrong and forced open the door, quickly wrapped a towel around my leg and drove me to the hospital. During the trip to the hospital, I remember saying to my dad, "I don't want to die," repeatedly. He told me only recently that he was quite traumatized by this, and it is the only reason why we still took a shower together until I was 12. At the hospital, they gave me an anesthetic, so I don't remember anything afterward, but I do remember slightly waking up mid-operation and then quickly falling asleep again. I woke up on the hospital bed, and the first thing I thought to myself was, "I'm naked." I was hospitalized for 3 days and had to stay at home for 5 months. Safe to say I should have failed my first grade, but somehow I passed with flying colors. The doctor said that the wound cut deep into the bone. My dad said he could see my 2 very white bones. It didn't cut my nerve system, and it was just a centimeter away from a blood artery, so I was very lucky to survive and to still be able to use my leg. On the plus side, I can now joke with my friends that I've got scars from fighting off mugglers. It just goes to show you how, one silly mistake or accident that happens when you're a child can stick with you for the rest of your life. Glad he was able to keep his leg. Story 38. Was taking a shower and raised my arm up to wash my armpit/trap and blew out my back. Don't know if that's the right term, but I pulled something in my lower back and it caused pain there whenever I tried to do anything for the rest of the week. I'm 21. Story 39. Closing a door. I learned at an early age that acting on intrusive thoughts equals pain. When I was 5, I left my index finger inside the door frame when closing just because I wanted to see what happens. Took off nearly a third of my finger, of which I still have a scar to remind me. I've had a mild to severe urge to act on intrusive thoughts my whole life, but my door finger chop incident reminds me to put that crap way deep down inside of you and just not think about it. Story 40. I recently managed to step on several X-Acto blades just by standing up, if that counts. Turns out I had dropped the little black thing that holds new blades, and you can put the old blades into to stop from stabbing yourself with them. I may have set myself up for this injury, but it's just due to my own clumsiness/forgetfulness. There was a lot of blood. The stack of blades, it was 2 to 3 stuck together, went just about completely into my foot. Worst part is, this happened before. First time was just 1 blade, and it didn't go in as far, so there's practically no blood. Edit. Oh, I also tore the tendon completely completely from the bone in my left ankle when I was 13 just by running around and playing outside and tripping, and then repeated the injury on the right side at 18 by standing around while playing pool. I rolled my ankle and heard an ungodly snapping/cracking noise and could barely walk. That was also not fun. My ankles have never been the same. Edit 2. Forgot about when I was walking into the bathroom, slammed my left pinky toe into the door, which just doesn't make sense how the door was situated, and it hurt a bit, but whatever. Went and sat on the couch, my left foot tucked under my leg, as one does, when I felt a dampness on my leg. Lo and behold, I'm covered in blood and down a toenail. Went back to the bathroom and found the entire polished toenail on the floor. A few days later, I saw that I actually had half a toenail under that toenail, so I'm pretty sure that nail bed is just effed. Story 41. Went to grab my rifle out of a locker when I was in the Marines and somehow sliced my knuckle down to the bone. Needed stitches from a corpsman who had never given stitches before. My dumb F lieutenant walked up to the same locker and ran his finger on the edge to test its sharpness and cut himself down to the tendons. Story 42. I snapped my right radius, just below the wrist, in half trying to catch a football. It was in the backyard at my grandma's house and we were having a family barbecue. I went deep to catch a football and jumped for it. On the way down, it looked like I was going to land in the new bush my grandma had just bragged about planting, so I twisted to avoid it. Landed on my wrist. Had to have my bone reset in the ER. Had to wait a week on pain meds for the swelling to go down so I could have surgery. A plate, a pin for a tendon, and multiple screws were installed. A few months of physical therapy later, it's mostly back. I had to be left-handed for almost a year. Story 43. I got pushed down the slide by a bunch of boys during recess in 2nd grade. I landed on my ankle awkwardly and started crying, and the teacher on duty came over and told me to walk it off. By the time the second recess started, my ankle was the size of a grapefruit. One trip to urgent care later, turns out I had severely sprained my ankle, almost to the point of a fracture. I was in a cast for a month. I still hate that teacher that told me to walk it off. Story 44. Not me, thank God, but my ex's stepfather gave himself serious burns when he spilled Oatso Simple on himself. It was a sachet of porridge that you microwave, and as he got it out of the microwave, he managed to spill the bowl towards himself and it went down the inside of his dressing gown. It basically stuck to him like burning glue, and the skin on his chest just sloughed off. Another friend of mine pulled a newspaper towards him on a table and didn't even register that his cup of tea was in between him and the newspaper. He pulled it right onto his lap and spilled scalding tea on his special places. Story 45. I sprained my wrist opening a jar of coconut oil. It took me close to 2 months to fully recover without pain. But in all honesty, it was more embarrassing having to explain to people at my martial arts gym that I can handle sparring and jujitsu, but I'm not conditioned enough for cooking without injury. I have also cut myself while baking. Maybe I should stick to cereal. Story 43. I got a hernia. Is that the right word? In my spine when I bent over to pick up a t-shirt. Hurt like hell. Recovery 2 months. I tore off my left leg quad when I went to board my dad's motorboat. Slippery surface accident. Recovery 2 years. I cracked my hip bone when I had stopped with my snowboard and was easing the footing. Landed on an ice path with some grooves in it. Smack dab, no more fun times for me. Recovery 1 month. I dislocated a finger when I was in a hurry to open a door. I kind of got the handle in between the fingers instead of in my palm. Don't ask, I don't know how. About a week's recovery here. I've also landed on my neck, on my knees, and on my back while snowboarding. Semi-serious accidents. Broke my left arm while swinging from a tree branch and landed badly on a stone surface. Oh, I cracked my head when I planted my back head in a radiator on a trip to Germany. Fun times. Bled like serious F. Also, have another radiator accident when I punctured one of my ass cheeks on another trip to Norway. Also lots of bleeding, but mainly I had trouble skiing after. I slipped with a plane shaver and removed the top layer and nail from my left pinky. I was 8. There's more, but I'm on mobile and felt this is the worst/funniest of them. Story 47. I was driving home from helping my SO's mother move a few, lightweight but awkwardly sized, boxes, and suddenly got a very sharp pain in my side. 2 days, 2 ultrasounds, and 1 CT scan later, I found out I had burst my spleen while sitting in my car. 1 out of 10 would not recommend. Story 48. I fell downstairs, like a lot, but the worst was when I was 9 months pregnant. Fell down the stairs, broke both feet, and broke my water. Delivered healthy baby the next day. Another time, I fell down the stairs and broke my pelvic bone. I think that one hurt the most. I now live in a house with no stairs. Thank you very much. Story 49. Bent down to put my dog on her head and felt my back go ping. It was very sore. Thanks to the workers of NHS 24 in the UK, my wife got a prescription over the phone for diazepam, 1 tablet every 6 hours. A doctor then came to our house and assessed me. He injected more diazepam into my arse and told my wife she could give me 1 diazepam every 2 hours if I asked for it. I couldn't get off the floor for 2 days and had to piss in a bottle. Thank God I never felt the urge for a crap. Could only crawl on my hands and knees for the next 2 days. Managed to get upright the day after, but needed 2 walking sticks. I was on 2 sticks for a couple of days and then down to 1 stick for another day. From start to finish, it was 2 weeks before I was fit to work again. Or at least fit enough to fake being fit enough to work. If I don't work, I don't get paid. I was amazed at how such a simple task could effectively cripple me. But I also found it amazing that on the day after this happened, I was honestly wondering if I would ever work again, and a week later, I knew it was going to be okay. Thank God. 0 out of 10. Hope never to do it again. Story 50. Dislocated my shoulder while putting on a seatbelt. Dislocated my thumb zipping up a zipper. Dislocated several ribs picking up a pen. Dislocated a finger wiping down a sink. I have Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, so my whole life is injuring myself in innocuous ways. Story 51. I enjoy having breakfast in bed. I like waking up to the smell of bacon. And since I don't have a butler, I have to do it myself. So most nights before I go to bed, I will lay 6 strips of bacon out on my George Foreman grill. Then I go to sleep. When I wake up, I plug in the grill, I go back to sleep again. Then I wake up to the smell of crackling bacon. It's delicious. It's good for me. It's the perfect way to start the day. I got up, I stepped onto the grill, and it clamped down on my foot. That's it. I don't see what's so hard to believe about that. Story 52. I stabbed myself 1.5 inches deep in the neck with a large serrated kitchen knife while I was making an after-work sandwich. Almost killed myself. Went to the ER. They didn't believe my crazy story about rolling my ankle on one of my daughter's toddler toys while having an argument with my wife about me smoking in the car, so they called the cops in and grilled my wife trying to get a confession in one room and had abuse counselors pleading with me that I was safe now and she couldn't hurt me in the other. There's a lot more to this crazy story. I'll elaborate if anyone asks me to. Story 53. I almost died because I took 2 aspirins. I was feeling bad, so I took 2 aspirins. I spent half the night vomiting and bleeding from my mouth and from my ass. I went to the hospital the next morning, but they didn't find anything. I stopped bleeding and vomiting, but felt weaker and weaker. So I came back to the hospital and they realized I had severe anemia. The doctors told my parents my life was in quite serious condition. After some tests, they found a bleeding ulcer likely caused by the aspirins. They had to surgically treat the ulcer and quite a blood transfer, and 3 weeks resting at the hospital. Story 54. Was leisurely longboarding down a popular trail here in Chicago. Swerve out of the way for a lady and her dog. My wheels brush against a cobblestone part of the path. I fall. Pretty standard skateboard/longboard experience. Except the way my right leg took the fall forced my femur out the back of my ass, ripped most of the cartilage off the head of my femur, fractured my pelvis in 5 places. In the hospital for 2 weeks. I had to have reconstructive surgery, with 3 months of crutches and staying completely off the leg. Almost 5 months out from the injury, currently bankrupt, just trying to get back into the swing of things. Maybe not that mundane of a task, but considering I've been riding a skateboard for almost 18 years and have actively conquered hills of death and destruction, blasting down mountainous terrain at 30 plus miles per hour, did not think a nice easy ride would go so bad. So that's taking the term butthurt a little too literally. Didn't even know the human body could do that. That just sounds insanely painful. Man. Story 55. I had a roommate throw out his back brushing his teeth. He was stuck in bed for a couple days and took a few weeks to recover. He even missed work and went to the hospital because of the pain. All he did was lean forward slightly and spit out some toothpaste. It also hurt him to laugh. I would make him laugh. Story 56. While trying to cut something in order to get it open, I used more strength than was needed, and that's where I got it open, but the pointy part of the scissor stabbed my pinky and a blood vessel as well. It wasn't anything like dripping blood, but with force the blood was going out. My vision started to get blurry while I was trying to ask my GF for help. I collapsed like 4 times because my vision was blurry and my head became light. At the 4th time, I fainted for a minute. I happened to damage my tendon, which resulted in me not being able to move the top part of my pinky and needed emergency surgery. Nowadays, I'm not allowed to use the hand with the damaged pinky, only allowed to do the daily exercises. This all happened on the 1st of this month. Now I'm living on noodles because I was unemployed at the time the accident happened and can't search for any jobs till next year. Story 57. I broke my foot and my nose mowing the lawn. I was using a patrol mower and accidentally went a bit too fast and tried to run/jog to keep up with it. I think my logic was that I didn't want it to fly out of my hands, but it had a kill switch, so not sure why I ran. I tripped over a bump in the grass, smacked my face on the handlebars of the mower very hard, and landed funny on my foot. Got a lot of laughs out of the nurses and doctors at A&E. Story 58. I herniated a disc sleeping on a futon when I was 27. I gave myself a concussion tripping over a shoe. I sprained my knee falling up some stairs. When I was 2, I broke my ring and pinky finger on my right hand because I was waving at my dad through an open window and accidentally knocked away the stick that was holding the window up. When I was 1, broke my ring and pinky finger on my left hand because it got caught in a collapsible stroller I was sitting in. Story 59. A bathroom lock cut the tip of my thumb off a few weeks back. It's one of those metal sliding ones every crappy stall and office building and schoolhouse crapper has in America. It was jammed and hitting the door wouldn't pry it open, so I basically yanked it clean to one side and it gave way. The sheath caught my thumb between its end and the knob handle, and the force sheared a good chunk of my thumb and nail off. Thankfully, nothing serious. My coworkers thought it was hilarious, especially since I hollered, "Mother effer" at the top of my lungs. I left covered in blood. I now fear that bathroom. I'm sorry, what? Nothing that serious and people laughing at you? You lost a part of your thumb. How's that not serious and what's funny about that? Story 60. I managed to give myself the equivalent of a small paper cut when I was peeling a banana once. I'm not entirely sure how I managed it, but the outside edge of the peel just sliced cleanly through the flesh of my index finger. Not really a terrible injury, but definitely a mundane task that shouldn't have caused me any injury at all. I also got a really nasty deep cut on my shin from walking into the open dishwasher as I was unloading it and repeatedly reminding myself not to do it. I'm going to go ahead and blame that one on whoever designed my apartment, though. What kind of idiot doesn't leave enough walking space for you to move around the dishwasher to put things away? Story 61. My mom was walking on a hardwood floor in socks while holding a wine glass, slipped, dropped the glass, then fell on her bottom on the broken glass. She had a huge ass gash that she refused to get stitches for since she didn't want to explain how. She's literally the clumsiest person I've ever met, and I worry about her all the time, lol. Story 62. I've had my left lung spontaneously collapse 4 times, basically for no reason. First time, I was eating a cookie and accidentally inhaled some, I guess, and started coughing really hard. My chest felt funny, and I had a hard time hiking up a mountain. I was on a trip and didn't tell anyone until the end of the week. Otherwise, I felt alright. Went to the doctor once I got home and had an x-ray. Turns out it had collapsed. It ended up healing naturally this time. Second time was about 4 years later, and it just happened randomly one day while I was basically doing nothing. Had the same feeling, so I knew what it was. Went to emergency, and they poked my side to expel the air in my chest cavity. Third time, I felt it pop randomly a year later. Same emergency run, but they said if it happens again, I will need surgery. A week later, I was drying off after a shower and pop. Then had surgery about 13 years ago. Everything's been fine since. Don't be a tall white male. Story 63. When I was 5 years old, I was at a playground with my dad and brother and went down a relatively small slide. As I got to the bottom, my dad had this horrible look on his face and asked if I was alright. "I'm fine, Dad. Why?" He said he heard a crack as I was coming down the slide. I heard nothing and felt absolutely fine. He persisted with caution anyways and prodded at me for a bit. When he got to my leg, fibula maybe, it was a little tender but did not hurt at all. He carried me to the car and wouldn't let me put any weight on it, then took me right to the ER. Sure enough, the bone was broken and I had to wear a hard cast for a month. Even got to be pushed around in a wheelchair for a while since I was too little to use crutches. All from going down a children's slide. Still not sure how it happened. Story 64. I was eating a burger at a pub where they gave me a fork and a steak knife. The knife fell off the table and into my lap whilst I was eating said burger. My legs automatically closed quickly. Unfortunately, one leg pushed the end of the knife into my other leg, and I ended up stabbing myself as the knife went about 5 centimeters into my thigh. Went to the hospital to get stitches. Sad face. Story 65. I was walking down the hall, and I snapped all the ligaments up to my knee in my right leg. It took forever to heal, and I have permanent damage now. My cousin caught me, and he said it sounded like a bunch of rubber bands being popped. All I did was step a little weird and lose my balance. Story 66. I was stretching on a chair while playing video games and felt a huge pop in the chest, with persistent pain afterwards. Got some spontaneous pneumothorax. Basically, my left lung burst a little and let air out into my chest. I opted for the removal of the tip of the lung, as it would likely cause problems again, and had to have a cannula and vacuum connected to my chest for a few days. Story 67. My dad was always talented at getting injured. One time when I was a toddler, the cat got out and my dad went to chase it. He was running, bent over to scoop the cat up, and crashed head first into a fire hydrant. Got 12 stitches. Another time, he was stripping the rubber casing off cables to get at the copper underneath. The curved carpet blade he was using went right into his thigh, through jeans. Another 5 stitches. I think the funniest one, though, was when my dad was shifting a hose at twilight, stumbled, got his leg stuck in a hole, and broke it. When Grandma was picking him up, he was in the back of the car laying down and she tried to close the door. It wouldn't close, so she tried a few more times. She was closing it on his broken leg, and it hurt so much he was silently screaming. Story 68. Effed my left ankle up in freshman year trying to dodge a random volleyball during gym class. Tripped up over my own feet. Ended up pulling my left foot just a little too far with my right foot and bam! Ended up tearing all the ligaments and tendons in my ankle. Took nearly a year and multiple tries at getting it to heal before they finally did an MRI and figured out that my ankle wasn't going to heal at all without surgery. I still have issues with that leg. 10 years later. Cut part of my left pinky finger off on a mandolin slicer while slicing a cucumber. Dumbass me didn't think to use the handguard, and right after telling DH I was fine, ended up running my pinky across the blade. A trip to the ER later because we couldn't get the bleeding to stop, and I got to walk around for a week with part of my left hand bandaged up, and didn't get to enjoy my cucumber snacks because they now had a little blood dressing. The really bad part? I'm left-handed. Story 69. I allegedly stabbed myself in the cheek with a fork as a toddler, trying to climb up onto a chair to sit at the table. Obviously, I don't remember it, but I still have 3 tiny dimple-like scars. My largest scar was also stupidly acquired. I was sitting at a metal picnic bench at my high school, stood up, and somehow caught myself on some rough bit of metal and tore a 5-centimeter gash right up to the back of my calf. I also fractured my left wrist in primary school when I tripped and landed on it, and last year I broke a toe after catching it on a wall I was jogging past. My best story is unfortunately a lie, but telling people I broke my collarbone while making my bed is still an amusing icebreaker. Story 70. I've got 2. 1. Threw out my back while crouched over a bathtub to just wash my hair. Was a teenager and running behind, so didn't have time for a full shower. Was out of commission for like a week. 2. Managed to impale my toe on a sewing needle through a slipper while just shuffling along after a tiring rehearsal. Bled like crazy. Story 71. Hit a pothole on a vintage rigid frame motorcycle, only rear suspension, was 15 pounds of air in the rear tire, at 75 to 80 miles per hour. Yeah, it was the speed of traffic on the freeway at the time. When the rear wheel hit the front of the pothole, everything went up so fast, it compressed the spine so hard I broke 2 vertebrae and herniated 4 lumbar discs. Still dealing with it 28 years later. Still riding too. Story 72. I took my seat in class. 12th grade history class. Walked in, sat down, and IDK what it was about the fact of sitting down that ended up debilitating me, but instantly after taking my seat, I had a huge muscle spasm in my back. I tried to stick it out and just wait for it to go away, but I wasn't so lucky. I knew I couldn't stay. My eyes were watering, and I was basically writhing around in my chair with what must have been a really entertaining facial expression to the rest of the class. The desks were arranged in a U shape, so everyone got a great view of this. I made a break for the door, and I managed to make it through and close it behind me before the pain was too much and I couldn't go any further. I just laid down on the floor in the middle of the hallway and flailed around on the floor since my back was still spasming. After about 15 minutes of this, the vice principal helped me hobble to his office. My dad had to drive out from the city to pick me up, since I couldn't even sit up, let alone drive myself. It took a handful of Robacks, my dad, and the vice principal to help me walk from his office to my dad's car. Missed 2 days of school, and my teacher had to drop off my school stuff and my cell phone that was abandoned at my desk. Never experienced anything like that before or since. I sit down a lot more carefully now. Story 73. I was once carrying a pot of pumpkin soup at work and it slipped out of my hands. It hit the floor so perfectly that a geyser of molten orange soup exploded out and hit me in the face and shoulders. I was looking down at it as it fell. The majority of the kitchen floor and walls were sprayed, and the soup was so hot that my nose was red and swollen for a few days. I told my GF and she said, "Oh, sorry to hear that, Pumpkin." Story 74. Talking on a corded phone and getting hit by lightning. It hit a pole in the neighborhood and I was on the ground. It threw me across the room and I was in pain. I ended up in the emergency because apparently your heart stops after getting hit. It blew a hole in my eardrum and I lost my memory. I had to go to therapy for several months. To this day, I can't do numbers or remember names. I don't remember yesterday and have my GF do a lot of the memory type chores for me. Story 75. I was playing a game of tag with my parents at my grandparents' house. They have quite a big house, so we played tag quite often. At the time, I was around 6 or 7, and me being the little idiot I was, decided to run into the doorframe and act hurt to tag my dad. I ran into the doorframe all right. The metal part of the doorframe went into my head and I had to be rushed to the hospital. A game of tag is more dangerous than you would think. Another thing I did when I was around 9 was I dropped something on the floor under a pole and decided to pick it up. I didn't even think about the pole and just headbutted it. I was then rushed to the hospital and had to get stitched up because I had a large gash on my eyebrow. I had a black eye for about 3 weeks after. Story 76. I was carrying a potted plant from point A to point B in my yard. I tripped and landed on a cement sidewalk. The bottom corner of the ceramic pot landed on my right thumb. Hand hurt. When I looked at my thumb, I thought the thumb had been cut off. Nah, only crushed, with little crumbs and bits of bone falling out. 5 pins and 2 surgeries later, it has some feeling, looks like hell, and will never bend again. People in the emergency room give me no respect until they saw the x-ray. Story 77. Oh boy, thought I'd give my friends a good laugh while we were riding down an escalator. Jumped up and on the rails and did an amazing monkey drop-in. The best one ever. My payoff was laughter, and ripping all the muscles and or tendons down the length of my back. I guess I relaxed just a little too much. It was all I could do to unhook myself and get home where I recovered for the next week or two. I still suffer through reminders of this event nearly 20 years later. Just roll in bed wrong, move wrong in the shower, sneeze, etc. Takes 2 to 4 weeks for the pain to go away each time, depending on what set of muscles were pulled. It sucks. Story 78. I'm not sure this really counts, but I'll add it anyway. I was about 6 years old and our school had just built a brand new assembly hall. We were all called in after it was finished for the official opening, and because I arrived a bit late that day, I had to sit down in the back near the side wall. I can't remember how far we were through the ceremony, but suddenly a huge pane of glass fell out and crashed over my head. I sustained a severe concussion and the doctor was picking glass shards out of my scalp for what felt like hours. I mean, who the hell doesn't plaster in a new window properly? I was just sitting there, just sitting. What a crap day. Story 79. I turned right and broke part of my foot. And by that, I don't mean I was driving a car or anything. I was standing still and turned my body to the right and broke part of my right foot's pinky toe metatarsal. Somehow it happened from turning while my foot was standing on a wood floor. I believe I was around 13 years old at the time. Not a major injury for sure, but easily my most ridiculous. Story 80. I fractured my jaw eating cold pizza. I took a bite and heard the loudest crack noise ring in my ear. The other person in the room with me could hear it too. People always expect a crazy story when I say I fractured my jaw, but I honestly think this is the best story story I have. And this, folks, is why you don't eat at Papa John's. Rock solid, disgusting cardboard crust only gets worse when it's cold. I'm just playing, but yeah, let's move on. Story 81. I cut my thumb to bleeding on a bowling ball by accidentally getting it stuck and then it flying off on the backswing. Nearly hit the boy behind me. Worst first aid ever. I badly sprained my wrist by falling into a utility closet while trying to get a hanger. Terrible laundry-related incident. My daughters are following in my clumsy footsteps. One gouged her cheek open on a church handrail. The other recently gave herself a goose egg because she walked face first into a museum steam engine train. Story 82. Well, I was playing football for the first time in my life at 35 years of age. In the first few minutes of the match, I was defending a player who was coming really fast to our side. I tried to block him, put my leg hard on the ground, and in that process, twisted my knee badly. Here I am, leaving the ground with a swollen knee without even touching the ball. It turned out to be a severe hermathrosis. Had to undergo an arthroscopy for it later. After 10 years, even now, I've not recovered from it completely. Story 83. I've always said that the most dangerous place in the world is my driveway. There, I've broken my ankle so bad it stuck out the side and I needed surgery from slipping on some ice. I needed 7 stitches on my face from flipping over the handlebars of my bike when I hit the lip of a curb funny. Gave myself a concussion from hitting a fence post at the top of the driveway when I was running away from my sister as a kid. I've never injured myself so much in any other place. Story 84. After my kiddie bowling league, my friend and I would sometimes go play in the arcade at the bowling alley. It was in a small room by itself, sort of secluded from the rest of the alley. One day I didn't have any change, but that didn't stop me or my friend. We were pretending to play a racing game, the kind where you have to stand up to reach 2 steering wheels, especially when you're a short little kid. When the machine fell on top of both of us, I wiggled out and ran to get help. I couldn't speak because the wind was knocked out of me. My mother said I was pale as a ghost, but pointing did the trick. Some adults hoisted the machine off my friend. He had a few bruises, but that was it. Everyone thought I was okay too. Just had the wind knocked out of me. Later that day, while waiting to pick up my sister from elementary, I couldn't get over this gut-wrenching pain. It got bad enough that my mom took me to the ER. Turns out I had all sorts of internal bleeding. They were close to removing my spleen or something. Sorry, it was a long time ago and I don't remember the exact diagnosis. Thankfully, my vitals improved overnight and they called off the surgery. Said I could heal naturally. I was in the hospital for almost a week. Damn arcade machine. All that being said, I ate tomato soup and played Donkey Kong Country for the first time while in the hospital. So life was pretty good, I suppose. Story 85. I went to lift 2 27-inch monitors on a stand. Popped something in my back. 2 years later, I still have permanent lingering spine issues. I got rear-ended on the interstate, maybe 10 miles per hour. The damage to my car was so minor, I have trouble seeing the single line and scuff mark on my bumper. Airbags never went off. Got a concussion. Story 86. Oh man, I've been waiting for this question. I literally fell down one steel-reinforced concrete stair after picking up munchies at the corner store and broke my knee. There is no water, snow, or debris on said step, and I was 100% sober and had just left work. Literally snapped the kneecap in half from one damn misstep. Managed to drive myself home where my boyfriend decided we should head to the hospital for some x-rays. I thought I had just bruised myself good. Doctor was stunned. Had only seen a handful of patella fractures in his career. I was off work for 10 weeks and got to wear a super sexy leg brace that went from my upper thigh to ankle and did physio for 4 months after removing the brace. It was almost a year before I could walk like a normal person again, all for some damn snacks I needed to have. Story 87. This is beyond embarrassing to admit, but here we go. I was brushing my teeth one night and I was on a new active/fitness streak. I'm pacing back and forth in my place as I scrub away at my chompers. I decide to drop, white toothbrush still in mouth as I was in the hallway, to knock some push-ups. As I lowered myself, I felt a sharp pain, as if a knife was puncturing my throat. Nope, it was my toothbrush, lodged in the back of my oropharynx. Blood was spewing out all over my carpet as I pulled out my brush and ran to the tub. Grabbing tissue papers, I stuffed a wad in my mouth to apply pressure. 3 hours and one entire roll later, it stopped. Hurt to eat for a month. Story 88. So, one day when I was 7 or 8, I got a stomach bug and had to stay home from school. I took my dog out and he started to eat something he shouldn't have been, so I tried to pull it out. Didn't realize this was a bad idea, and got bitten on the thumb. My dad told me to get in the truck so we can get band-aids for the bleeding, and I whacked my head on the metal door and got a concussion. Story 89. Last spring I was walking the dogs and met a neighbor walking his dog. One of mine got scared of his dog and circled me 3 times, wrapping the leash around my legs. And as I tried to disentangle myself, I almost stepped on her and lost my balance. I ended up with gashes on both palms and both knees that bled profusely all the way home. Took about 6 weeks to heal up, and I still have a pretty good scar on my knee that's not going away. Story 90. I had run my hair through hot water in the shower so I could comb it before work. Easy task, right? Well, I angled my neck down while I went to dry it with a towel. As I moved my neck down, I felt, and could have sworn I heard, a single pop. My neck and upper back toward the base of my cervical spine locked and hurt like crazy. I couldn't move my neck. Driving to work was painful because I couldn't look out the side windows without rotating my entire torso. After it didn't go away after the first 2 days, I went to the doctor. Turns out I got a muscle spasm in my neck while attempting to dry it. I don't know how I did it, and the doctor didn't know how I did it. We just kind of laughed how I hurt myself drying my hair. Story 91. I was popping a pimple on my forehead and heard a loud pop in the back of my neck. Turns out, pulled muscle. Had to go on muscle relaxants for a week just to move my head side to side. Stupidest part was, it was a morning I was going to see a tennis match at a local university, except I wouldn't have been able to move my head to follow the game. Still laugh about that once in a while. Story 92. I was walking off a terrace to go behind a corner for a wee. It was just a small step down, maybe 10 centimeters, and I suddenly hit the ground, hard. I got back up, confused as to why that happened, and then I realized I'd sprained my ankle pretty badly. I walked a bit further and then fell down again and laid there on the ground for at least a couple of minutes. But I stubbornly refused to end the night and even walked home from there, about 2 kilometers. I couldn't walk nor stand for the next 3 days. I could stand but not walk for another 3 days, and I was limping around for another 2 weeks. Good times. Story 93. Riding a scooter on a sidewalk. No tricks or anything, just a smooth sidewalk at a leisurely pace. Hit absolutely nothing. I go flying forwards and the scooter handlebars hit me in the mouth. Instant blood gushing. Had to have emergency mouth surgery. A tooth got hit and lodged up into my soft palate. I remember being able to feel it right underneath my nose. Like, if you poke right underneath your nose, that's where the tooth was. Still have a hole in my gums from it. Was supposed to have corrective surgery when I got older, but never did. I haven't touched a scooter since. Story 94. I tried to grab a dart out of a dartboard. This resulted in my rotating my knee way more than it should, which dislocated my knee and my kneecap while also hyperextending or causing tears in pretty much everything you could possibly damage. For a while afterward, my tendon or muscle or something would pop out of place and I'd have to push it back where it belonged. Now, a few years later, it still hurts a little to bend my leg all the way inwards. All for a goddamn dart. How exactly does this happen? How do you blow your knee out, removing a dart from a dartboard? Like, are you just made out of clay or something? Good gracious. Story 95. I was washing the car and managed to slice the skin on my knee wide open with the license plate. The slice was about 2 inches long and about 1 inch wide. I was simply pulling on the hose that got stuck under the tire, tapped my knee on the plate, and didn't even think to look down. No pain, just saw my doggo with a concerned look on his face, running over, and then I saw blood everywhere. It's not that bad of an injury, but it was super messy. Car got washed though.